What if someone who walked away from you is now fighting a battle they cannot explain? Last night, while the world slept, your absence became louder than their thoughts. They are not simply missing you. They are confronting a part of themselves they have spent years trying to escape. Today, you'll discover why emotional distance sometimes strengthens invisible connections instead of breaking them. Why yesterday may have been the emotional turning point they never expected, and the hidden psychological process that can make someone feel your presence more powerfully than ever before. If this message is helping you see relationships, emotional distance, and human psychology from an entirely new perspective, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Every week, we explore the hidden patterns of the human mind, emotional transformation, and the unseen forces that shape our lives. Stay with us, because the next insight may explain something you've been wondering about for years.
Most people believe that distance weakens emotional connections. They assume that when two people stop talking, stop seeing each other, or disappear from one another's daily routine, the bond slowly fades until nothing remains. But the human mind rarely follows such simple rules. Some connections do not survive because of constant communication. They survive because they have reached a level beneath ordinary awareness. Once an emotional experience touches that deeper layer, physical separation no longer guarantees emotional freedom. Instead, silence often becomes the very space where hidden feelings begin to grow. The mind has a remarkable tendency to preserve experiences that carry deep emotional meaning. While ordinary memories gradually lose their intensity, emotionally significant relationships continue working beneath conscious awareness. A familiar voice, a forgotten place, a certain song, or even an ordinary evening can suddenly awaken emotions that seemed long buried. The person experiencing this often cannot explain why these feelings return so strongly. They may convince themselves they have moved on, yet their inner world quietly reveals a different truth. The emotional bond was never truly broken. It simply retreated into the unseen parts of the mind. This hidden connection often becomes strongest when one person attempts to suppress it. The more someone insists they no longer care, the more psychological energy is required to maintain that belief. Suppressed emotions do not disappear. They gather strength in silence. Over time, they begin expressing themselves through restless thoughts, recurring dreams, unexplained sadness, emotional tension, or a constant feeling that something important is missing. What appears to be emotional control from the outside may actually be an exhausting struggle taking place within. There are moments when this invisible bond suddenly becomes impossible to ignore. An ordinary day can unexpectedly turn into an emotional storm. A passing memory, a familiar scent, or a random coincidence can unlock feelings that have remained hidden for months or even years. In those moments, the mind realizes that what it tried to leave behind never truly left. Instead, the emotional connection continued growing beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to emerge with greater force than before. This experience often feels confusing because it arrives without warning and challenges everything the person believed they had overcome. The deepest emotional bonds are not sustained by constant conversation, but by psychological significance. When another person has touched parts of the self that were previously unknown, their influence continues long after they are physically absent. This is why someone may suddenly find themselves in a very difficult emotional state, feeling another person's presence more intensely than ever, despite complete silence. The invisible bond is not proof of fate or magic. It is evidence that the deepest parts of the human mind remember what the conscious mind struggles to forget, and until those emotions are honestly confronted, the connection continues shaping thoughts, emotions, and decisions from within. One of the greatest illusions of the human mind is believing that what is ignored has been defeated. People often convince themselves that by staying busy, avoiding memories, or refusing to think about someone, the emotional chapter has finally closed. On the surface, life appears to move forward. New routines are built, new conversations begin, and days pass without obvious signs of longing. Yet beneath this carefully maintained calm, the emotions that were never fully understood continue to exist. They do not vanish simply because they are denied. They wait in silence, gathering strength where conscious awareness cannot easily reach.
The mind has a natural tendency to protect itself from emotional discomfort. Instead of facing painful truths directly, it pushes them into the background where they become easier to ignore. At first, this defense feels like relief. The person believes they have regained control because the emotional pain is no longer constantly present. But what has been buried is not destroyed. Hidden emotions continue influencing thoughts, moods, and behaviors in subtle ways. A sudden feeling of emptiness, unexplained frustration, restless nights, or recurring memories often reveal that the inner conflict has never truly ended. The silence was only temporary.
Yesterday may have been one of those unexpected moments when everything hidden began to rise again. Without warning, a simple event, an ordinary place, or an unexpected memory may have unlocked emotions that had remained sealed away for months or even years. What seemed like a normal day suddenly became emotionally overwhelming. The person may not have understood why your presence felt so powerful all at once. They may have tried to dismiss the feeling, but the mind has its own timing. When suppressed emotions are ready to return, they often arrive with a force that surprises even the person experiencing them.
This return is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign that the emotional story was never completed. Every relationship that touches the deepest parts of the human psyche leaves questions that cannot be answered through avoidance alone. Feelings demand understanding before they can finally settle. Until that happens, the mind continues searching for resolution. This is why certain memories refuse to disappear. They return repeatedly, not to punish the person, but to invite them to confront what they have spent so much energy trying to escape. The emotional burden grows heavier the longer it remains hidden. The most difficult realization comes when someone finally understands that the pain they feel today was not created yesterday. Yesterday merely revealed what had been quietly growing beneath the surface all along. The emotions were always there, patiently waiting for the moment when the mind could no longer keep them locked away. In that moment, they are forced to face a truth they had avoided for far too long. The heart does not heal through denial, and the deepest emotions do not disappear because they are forgotten. They return because they are asking to be understood, accepted, and transformed before genuine peace can finally begin. Every person carries a hidden side of themselves that rarely appears in public. It is made up of the emotions they reject, the fears they refuse to admit, the regrets they bury, and the desires they convince themselves no longer exist. This hidden world remains quiet only as long as it is ignored, but silence should never be mistaken for peace. The parts of ourselves that we refuse to acknowledge do not disappear. They continue living beneath awareness, quietly shaping our thoughts, reactions, and emotional struggles. When someone tries to escape these hidden feelings, they often end up becoming controlled by them without even realizing it. Many people believe emotional strength means never looking back. They force themselves to act unaffected, convincing everyone around them that they have moved on completely. They avoid conversations, suppress memories, and build walls around their hearts. Outwardly, they appear calm and confident. Inwardly, however, a different reality unfolds. Every denied emotion becomes another weight carried in silence. The effort required to keep painful feelings hidden drains emotional energy day after day. What seems like self-control is often an exhausting battle against one's own inner world. Eventually, the hidden self begins demanding attention.
It may appear through restless nights, recurring dreams, sudden waves of sadness, unexpected anger, or an overwhelming sense of emptiness that has no obvious explanation. The person cannot understand why these emotions continue returning when they have done everything possible to leave the past behind. Yet the answer lies within. The hidden parts of the mind are asking to be seen rather than silenced. Emotional pain becomes louder whenever it is denied, because the mind naturally seeks wholeness instead of division. Yesterday may have become the moment when those hidden emotions could no longer remain locked away. Something seemingly ordinary, a memory, a familiar voice, a place, or even a brief moment of stillness, may have broken through the walls they spent so long constructing. Suddenly, your absence became impossible to ignore. Feelings they believed had disappeared returned with surprising intensity. They found themselves facing emotions they could neither explain nor control. It was not because those feelings were new. It was because they had finally become too powerful to remain hidden. True emotional freedom does not come from escaping the hidden parts of the self. It comes from having the courage to face them honestly. The pain they are experiencing is not merely about missing another person. It is the result of confronting everything they tried to avoid within themselves. Until they acknowledge those buried emotions, the inner conflict will continue repeating itself in different forms. But the moment they stop running and begin understanding their own heart, suffering can become the beginning of transformation. The deepest wounds often become the doorway to the deepest self-awareness, and only by walking through that doorway can lasting peace finally emerge. The human mind rarely communicates its deepest truths through words alone. Long before a person consciously admits what they feel, the unconscious begins sending quiet signals that something important remains unresolved. These signals often appear in ways that seem ordinary at first. A recurring dream, a face that repeatedly enters the mind without invitation, a sudden emotional reaction to a familiar place, or an unexpected feeling of longing during an otherwise normal day. Most people dismiss these experiences as coincidence. Yet the mind has its own language, and it often speaks through symbols, memories, emotions, and patterns before it ever speaks through logic. When someone attempts to suppress powerful emotions, these silent signals usually become stronger rather than weaker. The more they insist they have forgotten, the more frequently certain memories return. A song they have not heard in years suddenly feels impossible to ignore. A familiar scent instantly transports them back to a moment they believed had lost its importance. Even the smallest reminder can awaken emotions that have been resting beneath conscious awareness. These experiences are not random interruptions. They are the mind's way of reminding the individual that an unfinished emotional chapter continues to exist beneath the surface. Yesterday may have been filled with these silent messages. Perhaps nothing dramatic happened on the outside, yet internally everything felt different. They may have found themselves thinking about you repeatedly without understanding why. Your memory appeared during quiet moments, interrupted their concentration, or entered their dreams when they least expected it. They may have tried to push those thoughts away, but every attempt only seemed to make them return with greater intensity. It was as if the deeper parts of the mind refused to remain silent any longer, insisting that what had been ignored deserved to be acknowledged. These inner signals often become most powerful during periods of emotional exhaustion or personal uncertainty. When the distractions of everyday life begin to fade, the unconscious finds an opportunity to reveal what has been hidden for so long. In moments of solitude, the walls protecting the conscious mind become weaker, allowing forgotten emotions to rise naturally. This is why many people experience their strongest emotional realizations late at night, during dreams, or in moments of complete stillness. The silence outside creates space for the silence within to finally speak. The greatest mistake is believing these signals should simply be ignored. They are not signs of weakness or emotional failure. They are invitations to understand the deeper truths that the conscious mind has avoided. Until those emotions are honestly faced, the signals will continue returning in different forms, asking for attention again and again. The mind seeks balance, not denial. When someone finally listens instead of resisting, they begin to understand that these recurring thoughts and emotions were never their enemy. They were guiding them toward a truth that could no longer remain hidden, offering the possibility of healing through awareness rather than escape. Most people see emotional pain as something to escape as quickly as possible. They believe suffering is proof that something has gone wrong, that it should be avoided, hidden, or forgotten. Yet the deepest changes in human life rarely begin during periods of comfort. They begin when the familiar ways of thinking no longer work, when old defenses start to collapse, and when a person can no longer pretend that everything is fine. Emotional crisis is not always a sign of destruction. Very often, it is the first sign that the inner self is preparing for transformation. There comes a moment when the mind grows tired of carrying the same unresolved emotions. The constant effort to suppress memories, deny feelings, and maintain emotional distance becomes exhausting. What once seemed like control slowly turns into inner conflict. The person may notice increasing restlessness, sleepless nights, unexplained sadness, or a growing sense that something essential is missing from their life. These experiences are not random misfortunes. They often reveal that the old version of the self can no longer sustain the weight of unresolved emotional truths. Yesterday may have been one of those defining moments. Without expecting it, they may have felt your presence more strongly than ever before. A memory surfaced with unusual clarity. An emotion they believed had disappeared returned with unexpected intensity. They may have tried to distract themselves, but nothing seemed capable of quieting the thoughts that continued returning. What made the experience so unsettling was not simply remembering you. It was realizing that the emotions they had buried were still alive, waiting beneath the surface for the right moment to emerge. This emotional crisis presents a choice that every person eventually faces. One path leads back to denial, where the feelings are buried once again, only to return later with even greater force. The other path requires courage. It asks the individual to stop running from uncomfortable truths and begin understanding them instead. Transformation does not happen because pain exists. It happens because someone becomes willing to learn from that pain rather than escape it. The moment they face what they have been avoiding, the struggle begins to lose its power over them. The greatest turning points in life often arrive disguised as emotional breakdowns. What feels like losing control may actually be the beginning of deeper self-awareness. The suffering they experienced yesterday was not necessarily the end of their emotional journey. It may have been the moment their inner world finally demanded honesty. When a person allows pain to become a teacher instead of an enemy, they begin rebuilding themselves from a place of truth rather than fear. And in that transformation, they often discover that the greatest battle was never against another